Welcome to Series 5 of The Life of Letters, a podcast exploring the art, history and future of calligraphy, handwriting and all things letter-related. I'm your host, Laura Edralin, a London-based calligrapher with a curious mind, continuing this journey to connect with artists, historians, experts and letter lovers all around the world. As the podcast grows, I'm so grateful that this season is once again kindly supported by Speedball Art, champions of craftsmanship and creativity, helping keep the life of letters thriving across generations. Today, I'm speaking with Angenise Rawls, a mama artist who specialises in calligraphy and engraving at the Graceful Pen Studio. She started her business in 2018, specialising in handmade greeting cards. Now she offers calligraphy services on paper and other surfaces for individual commissions such as poems, wedding vows, birth announcements, as well as brands. Her work has been featured with Community of Christian Creatives, Manuscript Brands, The Flourish Club, Versa Chalk, Speedball Calligraphy, Paper and Ink Arts, and Calligraphers of Colour. A huge welcome to the Life of Letters, Angenise. It's so nice to finally meet you off Instagram.
Yes, thank you so much, Laura, for your invitation. I'm honored that you asked me to be on your podcast, and it is wonderful to see your face and to meet off of Instagram. So this is wonderful. Thank you.
So nice. And we are across the other side of the world from each other. So this is the beauty of doing podcasts, is that we can connect and record these conversations and be able to share them, because
Yes.
I think it's lovely connecting with other calligraphers as well, like the work that you do. So I wanted to kick things off with asking you a little bit about how you fell into calligraphy and where that transition point was to turn it from something that you were practicing, learning, beginning out with, to this business, the Graceful Pen Studio.
Well, it's amazing that you ask that, because as I look back on how I got started, I believe it chose me. I didn't choose calligraphy. So how it got started is I was ahead of my class in elementary school. So I was doing sixth grade work, but I was still in the fifth grade. And my English teacher, she knew calligraphy, and she said to me, because I was ahead of the class and, to kind of, I guess, keep me from being bored and doing monotonous things, she said, I have something I want to teach you. And I thought, oh. And she said, well, you have lovely penmanship and I want to teach you calligraphy. And I thought, oh, I've never heard of it. So she taught me the metallic hand, and she bought me a set of Elegant Writer pens, markers, and she taught me italic hand. And I was immediately smitten because I always loved letters. If I saw a fancy letter out somewhere, I would go home and I would practice it, just a whole page of that letter, So that's kind of how I got started with calligraphy. But I didn't stick with it around middle school. I stopped doing calligraphy. I did make cards and things for my parents and for friends if they asked me to make cards. So I think I've always had an affinity for doing that, because I would do that even as a child. But somewhere around middle school and high school, I must have gotten really busy with life. I also started taking piano lessons at 13, although I knew how to play by ear. My mom wanted me to have some lessons as well, and I think I just got busy with school and music lessons and so forth, and I kind of pushed calligraphy to the side. So when I became an adult, by late 20s, early 30s, I was going to the library getting stacks of soap making books and candle making books and calligraphy books and scrapbooking books. I mean, I would, it was just like I had this urge to craft and I didn't know what direction to go in. And then so about 2003, I became a member of a particular church. And when the church moved into a historic building, my pastor, I have a female pastor, and she said, I have something for you. And I thought, oh, okay. And I didn't think much of it. She said, I found these in my office when we were cleaning the building. And she handed me a pack of calligraphy pens. And it was like everything I had done as a child just came flooding back to me. I had forgotten about calligraphy. I mean, I always loved writing and everything, but literally I had forgotten about calligraphy. So she gave me those pens, and I thought, oh my gosh. Well, how did she know? Well, I know God must have told her because I never said anything to anybody. And so that really opened the door. And I joined the bereavement committee at my church. And so I started making cards because on the bereavement committee, it was my job to kind of choose a card, a sympathy card for a family that was in bereavement. And one day I struggled to find a card that really had a nice sentiment that didn't sound, off the cuff. I mean, I needed it to feel like it was something from the heart, and I couldn't find anything that felt that way. And I thought, I know what I'll do. I'll just go and make a card. um, and so that really was the catalyst, I guess, to me starting my business. Because once I started making cards, my pastor encouraged me to start a business, and I thought, I have no clue how to even go about doing that. I put it off for several years. Then I finally started doing some research because it kept, you know, kind of nagging at me in the back of my mind that she encouraged me to do that and I hadn't done anything about it. Um, and finally in 2018, I started my business and the rest is history.
And here it is. And here you are. Incredible. What a journey. And how interesting. I mean, the more I speak to people about their journeys into calligraphy or lettering, there is always these little connecting dots that
Yes.
just, they might come in and out of our lives, but they're sort of re-emerging at just the right time when you think, oh, I wasn't even thinking about that, but here it is. So yeah, beautiful. What a lovely introduction to who you are and what you do as well, because you work in lots of different ways. So it's not just not just calligraphy, not just scripts, but you do floral illustrations, you do engraving, which obviously includes lots of lovely scripts as well. But out of all these different elements that you do, what's your kind of favorite, if you can choose one?
That is a wonderful question. And I think I would really have to say the card making for me because it's so tangible and I feel like my love language is giving. And I love giving something that I've made to someone else and either seeing their reaction if we're in person or hearing back from them how something that I've made has touched their heart, or maybe perhaps they've requested me to give some or make something for them that they gifted to someone else, and they'll get feedback and let me know what you made was just phenomenal or really touched that person's heart. And that touches my heart because I feel like if I can make something that makes a difference in someone else's life and gives them hope, perhaps at a time when, things are looking very bleak, then I feel like, I've done something more than just make something, but I've made something that has a purpose. And I feel like everything that I do has to have a purpose. Even with calligraphy, it took me a while to learn copperplate. I fell in love with copperplate even before I started my business. Didn't know how to do copperplate, but I knew that that was what I wanted to do. And when I finally learned it, I was thinking to myself, oh, I can use this to, make my cards. And then after a while, I started slowly getting back into the broad edge and introducing italic hand and those sorts of things because italic hand and other scripts like Fracture and Gothic scripts, black letter, kind of lend to more masculine cards and things like that. But it's not to say that copperplate doesn't appeal to them as well because I have made cards, that have included copperplate or even just a basic monoline italic hand script, and they've been well received. So I think just making things with my hands and being able to make a card and give something tangible to someone really is my favorite thing to do.
I think that's lovely. And when you've got such a vast kind of scope to work with, like having the choice of scripts, like, oh, which style shall I do this in? You can really feel into what the message is, what the sentiment is, who it's going to, and kind of build a design from there, right? So
Yes,
it's incredible to have copper plates, black letters, all of these different options, which are quite different
right.
visually, but you're crafting them, really sort of placing these letters down in a certain way and letting people kind of feel what you've created for them, which is lovely. And a question about sort of, obviously you've done lots of different projects and stuff, but is there something that you would love to do that you haven't yet?
Well, there's lots of things that I would love to do that I haven't yet. I'm always seeing new things, but it's not necessarily new. For example, I have a calligrapher and she knows how to embroider her calligraphy. And I think that's wonderful. That is not something I wish to do. I feel like a lot of the things that I want to do kind of tie in with what I'm already doing, and they kind of will enhance what I'm currently doing. Um, so, for example, when I wanted to learn how to engrave, when I found out that that was a thing, and when I finally learned it and felt like, oh wow, this is something great. I can make gifts for people. And then when I learned that working with brands was a thing, I thought, oh, I'd like to do that. And I kind of practiced with friends and coworkers and that kind of thing to see, do I really like people watching me while I'm working? Is that an issue? So I've said all that to say that I think that I just always constantly want to refine my skills. So, for example, with floral illustration, I'm constantly studying and learning because there is a style that I want that I know I haven't developed yet. There's a style I'm
Mm.
looking for to emerge, and I don't feel like it's emerged yet, but I know that I can draw flowers. Do I feel comfortable 100% of the time? No, sometimes I second guess myself, but I think that's with all artists. We all kind of second guess ourselves and things, but um, definitely bottle painting. I have learned watercolor painting and acrylic painting, and I like both mediums. Um, so bottle painting uses more of the acrylic, and that's something that will lend its hand to embellishing my floral illustration because I'm not a botanical person. Like, I don't have gardens outside in my yard or anything like that. There's not a lot of botanical places to visit, but I do love flowers. So I haven't studied them enough to, just be able to draw a flower off the whim. I have to look up a photo reference. And I think the more I practice, the better I'll get at it because now when I go somewhere, I can say, oh, that's a hibiscus flower. Oh, yes, I've been studying and I'm actually learning. Like, I don't have to guess, what is that flower? So that makes me happy. And I feel like with painting, the same thing. I think the more they go hand in hand because I find the more that I paint, it helps me to visualize when I draw and vice versa. So I just want to refine my craft and just continuously get better, um, just to, make better things.
Love that. Yeah, there's so much to learn. There's so much that you
Yes.
can do, and so many areas that you can take your creative kind of interests into, right? So that's, yeah, it's a difficult question to ask,
Yeah.
but great that there's lots that you're kind of keen to do. And I wanted to come back to the kind of faith side of your business because you're obviously a devoted Christian, and I know you've worked in various ways to support the church and the community, and you've mentioned being on the bereavement committee. But can you tell us a little bit more about what you do with your calligraphy and the church?
Okay. So, I really feel like my card making, as I've grown doing it for my business, has evolved for the bereavement committee at church. And I also feel like what I've done at church has kind of been a catalyst to the way that I create cards now. And although all of them are not necessarily faith based, when I say that, I recognize that everyone is not a Christian. So sometimes I've made cards, they don't feature scripture or anything like that. They may not say God or Jesus or anything like that. But I approach it from a perspective of, I want this to touch that person's heart. And so I'm aware of that, and I feel like I pray and ask for wisdom to be able to put the right words that will speak to that person's heart. Case in point, there was a lady on my job. And a few years ago, when she found out that I could engrave, she said, I have a commission for you. And I said, oh, I wasn't expecting that. And she said, I'll share with you why after. I can't share with you now. And I said, that's fine. And so she told me what she wanted me to make. And she, you know, we went through what she wanted me to engrave. And then afterward, it was so precious. She came to me and she just hugged me and she cried. And she said, you don't know how much this means to me. She had lost a child and she wanted me to engrave something on glass for a friend, because that friend was there for her during that time when she had lost her child. And there's a tree she has in her yard, and she wanted to put leaves inside of the glass. So I had to make sure it was a particular type of glass frame. And I had explained all that to her once she told me what she was looking for. I said, oh, I can get a floating glass frame. You can put those leaves from the trees inside of it and you can send it to her. And she just cried on my shoulder. And I thought, wow, this is what I'm made to do, to not just create pretty things. A lot of times I think we see something that's pretty, but we don't know the story behind it. And that really had a lot of sentimental value for her. And I said all that to say that recently I could tell that she was really going through some things. She had just had some rough moments in her life, and I thought I need to make her a card. So I found out what her favorite color was, and I said, "Okay, I've got something in mind for you." And I didn't tell her what I was going to do. And it just seemed like my time was running short, and I thought I've got to make this card for her. I didn't promise her when it was going to be, but I knew it was an urgency, that I had to do it. So I finally said, "Okay, I've got to sit down. It doesn't have to be perfect. Even if I just take 5 minutes, I'm going to make this card for her." Brought it into work the next day, and she said, "Oh my gosh, I needed this at this moment." And she cried on my shoulder again. And I thought, you know, I'm so grateful that I listened to that little, nudge in my heart to do something. I mean, I saw that there was a need and I knew that there was something I could do. And I told her, I hugged her back and I told her, I'm praying for you. And she said, I really appreciate that. And I didn't put any scripture in the card or anything like that because I know she's not necessarily, like a devout Christian or anything like that. I didn't want to push her away. I just wanted to be a source of comfort, and let her know that somebody had thought about her. And I want to let her know as a mom and as a wife and as somebody that works, and she has a special needs child as well. I said, you are enough. And she needed to know that. She said, I'm going to put this card up to remind me that I am enough.
If you're enjoying this episode and fancy supporting the podcast, you can literally buy us a coffee. Head to the link in the show notes. It's a lovely way to help keep the Life of Letters going. Thank you. Now let's get back to the episode.
As moms, I don't know if you're a mother or not, but I'm a mother of 8. And so I have my last 2 still here at home. And as a mom, that takes a lot. You're giving a lot. And then I'm a wife, so you're giving a lot when you have a spouse. And then I work. So, you're constantly giving. Well, you need somebody at some point in time to pour into you and let you know you're your kids aren't going to say, Mom, you're doing a great job. Your husband's probably not going to say, you've been a wonderful wife. I mean, they may in so many words, but sometimes you just need to hear those words. So I look for those moments to encourage other people because I feel like as a result of being on the bereavement committee at church, it has allowed me to be sensitive to other people's hearts. Sometimes people open up to me and I know that they didn't have to. And I hope I'm not being too long-winded in my answer, but I feel like all of this really ties in. Right after COVID, one of my daughter's classmates, I noticed she hadn't been getting on the bus. And so a week later, I saw the mom and I went up to her and I said, I hope everything is okay. Did you guys get sick or something? And then I saw tears well up in her eyes and she said, no, I lost my husband. I thought, oh my gosh, it devastated me. And I could only imagine how devastating it was to her to even be able to say that and to have to get up and take her kids to school. And be reminded every day that her, the love of her life was no longer there. And I said to myself, I've got to do something for her to just really encourage her. And I hugged her, of course, at that moment. And I told her I was praying for her. And she told me that meant a lot. But I made a card for her to let her know, that there's somebody that is thinking of you. And I think for Valentine's Day one year, I got her some flowers and a donut or something like that, just to let her know somebody's thinking about her. Um, and I try to text her every now and again if I don't see her or whatever to, just let her know she's thought of. Um, and even there's a few people on my job, they've lost their husbands, and usually around Mother's Day, I make sure that even if it's just something small, a bookmark or something, I try to give them something. And they say, you don't know how much this means. So sometimes I realize it's those little things that we do that can make a huge impact in somebody's life. So,
That's beautiful. That is so lovely. And what a way to share your gift in, in a visible form. Like you can be creative for yourself, but
yeah,
when you are sharing it with others, there's this lovely ripple effect for
yeah,
each of those people to feel that there's been a creative mind behind this and a creative hand behind it, and you'd really thought it through. And I think it's also, we can share and we can talk, and those conversations are sort of in passing, right? You might remember some things people have said, and quite a lot of the time our brains forget all the lovely things and remember
right.
all the mean things. But with a card, it's reinforcing those words. It's very, very clear, the message that you're sending. And I think that's a really lovely thing to be able to do, and to be able to identify people who could really benefit with that, outside of everything else that you're doing, everything else
Yeah,
that's in your world.
yeah,
And I think that does really take somebody who lives it and experiences it, whether it's through the church or at home, or
right.
recognizing another mother, recognizing loss and hurt and pain, and that need for maybe lifting a little bit higher. So that's, yeah, it's just wonderful to hear that your work is having such a strong impact on the kind of wider community as well. So yeah, wonderful. And I noticed on your website you've got this wonderful quote that says, art is a collaboration between God and the artist, and the less the artist does, the better, which I think is written by Andre Gide. And this kind of just made me think about how things influence each other, which sort of perfectly segues into my question. And where we were just talking about, you can use your calligraphy to find a little bit of peace and calm to create it. You can use your calligraphy to write messages to people, for yourself. And you're doing that is giving hope and warmth to a lot of people through the words in your scripts. But do you also feel that your calligraphy practice has influenced your sense of faith too?
Yes, I do, because I don't know when I started scripture journaling. I have to go and find I have a little stash of journals now, but I don't remember the exact year. I want to say it was 2021, maybe 2022, something like that. And so I've collected quite a few journals now because, of course, they only have so many pages. So once I fill up one, I move on to another one. But that has really allowed me to grow spiritually. Writing down scripture that spoke to my heart at that moment. And then when I go back and look at it, like, oh, wow, I remember, you know, I've read that scripture so many times, but now I know and I can truly say I have a lot of favorite scriptures, but there are some that I notice I write more than others because they may be in several different books. So I know that particular passage is really spoken to my heart. And then on the calligraphy side, I've used um, my scripture journal as a practice playground. I find things, or I've come across something and I say, oh, I want to learn how to do that. Well, I'll do that in my scripture journal because nobody else is really going to see that. And, I'm not worried about it. But then I'm noticing that as I continue to do that, I'm growing in my skill set. And now there have been times where I felt comfortable enough to share it, even though it's not perfect. And I always express that, it's like a perfectly imperfect thing. My journal is, you know, a sacred space for me. I don't do it every day, but I do it as I have time. And there are times when I have more, um, there are days when I have more time than others. And so I'll spend a longer amount of time. And I've started now dating the particular page because at some point in time, I've gone back and I'll say, oh, I know I did this in 2021, but I don't know when, so now I'm realizing I think it's important for me to also date. And I feel like I've grown in my faith as well because as the more I journal, the more I feel like my relationship grows with the Lord because what I've written is now not just a passage of scripture, but now I'm realizing the connection between a lot of other scriptures. And I begin to write those thoughts down as well. And it just is amazing to me because I've seen the growth in myself spiritually. I've seen the growth in myself as an artist because I've decided to take a leap of faith and practice certain things. And I'm very attracted to like vintage artworks and so forth. So when I come across an artist from like the 1800s or something like that, I'm like, oh, I've got to find out who this person is. So I found out there's a person named Owen Jones. I was studying Michael Soule's cursive book and came across the name Owen Jones. And I thought, I've never heard of Owen Jones. Let me go and look him up. Well, come to find out, sometime around the late 1800s, he decided to pen the whole book of Psalms, so all 150 books of Psalms, and he presented it to a queen, and I don't remember her name offhand, but I thought, wow. And so I found the book, I believe, on Thrift Books, and it was so ornate. My mouth just gasped open. I couldn't even try to read it. I was just looking at all the beautiful artwork. I mean, he put acanthus leaves around on every page and all the borders of all the pages. And it's just absolutely stunning. So I looked at it from a perspective of art, and calligraphy, but I also looked at the spiritual side like, wow, this is amazing that he did that and he gave it as a gift to the queen. And I thought, oh my gosh, it was just, I don't know, it just kind of made everything explode within me. Like I had no words.
Yeah.
So when you get a
Yeah.
chance, if you've never heard of Owen Jones, I encourage you to
Owen
go and
Jones.
look him up.
I'm going to look that up. Yeah, I think anything that can take this concept of something. I love, quotes in particular are just, they're
Yeah.
so beautiful to write. There's a real meaning behind them, and then you can decorate. I mean, other people are very good at decorating and, or in ornate ways, and I just think, again, it's just showing that hand crafted, the time, the energy, the thought that goes into these pieces. And it's incredible to know that there are these lovely things going all the way back through
Yes.
history, and the tradition of writing letters and words. Beautiful. Oh, it's lovely. Okay, Owen Jones, one to remember. I'll see if I can
Yeah.
put a link in the notes. Um, so last series we asked our guests a slightly challenging question, which you've probably heard because I think you've listened to most of the series. But it was so good. We're going to ask it again. What is your favourite letter of the alphabet and why?
So I remember as a kid, remember I told you that I would see a pretty letter and I would practice it and practice it and practice it.
Yeah.
And the letter A was that, I mean, I've never identified it as my favorite letter, but I remember practicing the letter A so much. And every time I see a beautiful A, I've got to find something, a piece of paper somewhere to go and practice that beautiful, gorgeous letter A. And it doesn't ever occur to me that, oh, my name starts with the letter A. It's just beautiful. Like, wow, I can't believe they wrote that A that way. Oh my gosh, look at that design. So I think I'm in awe of the letter A, and it has
Yeah.
nothing to do with my name. I'm just fascinated with that letter. So the capital letter A.
Love
Yes.
that. And just fortunate that you happen to have a capital letter
Right.
A as well. But I mean, it would be, lovely that you get to practice that initial.
Yes.
It's great. Oh,
Yes.
Angenise, it's been so lovely talking to you. I want to say to
Likewise.
everybody to find out more about Angenise and all the work she does, visit the Graceful Pen Studio, or you can find her on Instagram at the Graceful Pen Studio. And as always, I will put all the links in today's show notes so people can find you a bit easier. But just a really big thank you for joining me and being part of the Life of Letters.
Thank you so much. I could give you a big hug, a big virtual hug.
Virtual hugs.
It's been wonderful. I really appreciate you, and it's been an honor. Thank you.
Thanks for listening. Series 5 is made possible by my wonderful producer Heidi Cullip and the support of Speedball Art, whose commitment to high-quality tools and creative tradition continues to serve, partner and deliver to artists all over the world. If you enjoyed the episode, don't forget to subscribe and leave a review or share it with a fellow letter lover. And until next time, keep listening, keep creating, and keep celebrating the life of letters.